The hammer came down and blue blood sprayed across the white sand. I felt the crowd around me surge too. Their feet, 200,000 alien voices, screaming at once, and I pressed myself deeper into my hood. My name is Daniel Hayes. I am 34 years old. I am the only human in this entire arena, and if anyone sees my face, I will be dead. Before sunset, the queen was on her knees. I could see her clearly from my spot in the lower tier where the common folk were packed so tightly I could barely breathe. Queen Athara Vasculan, ruler of the Thessari Dominion, last of her ancient bloodline. She was 7 ft tall, covered in silver scales that caught the light of the twin suns, and she had 4 arms. 3 of them were holding weapons. The 4th was pressed against a deep wound in her side, trying to stop the bleeding. Her golden eyes were dim, her movements were slow. She was losing, and she knew it. The warlord circling her was named Dravik Kor. He was smaller than her, only 6 ft tall, but thicker, heavier, built like a wall of muscle and black armor. He carried a massive ceremonial hammer that looked like it could crush a vehicle. He was not breathing hard. He was not wounded. He was smiling. This was the trial of sovereignty. Every 100 cycles, the queen had to defend her throne in single combat against anyone who challenged her. It was ancient law, older than the Thessari written language itself. 3 challengers had already fallen to her blades earlier in the day. But Dravik was the 4th, and Dravik was different. Dravik was going to win. I knew why, because I had spent 6 months hiding in the undercity of this planet, listening to whispers in dark alleys, translating conversations I was not supposed to hear. I had been a peacekeeper once back on Earth before I became a translator for the diplomatic service. My ship had been destroyed in an accident near this system 11 months ago. I had crawled out of the escape pod with a broken arm and a scrambled mind, and I had been running ever since. In those 6 months, I had learned things, dangerous things. I had learned that the queen was being poisoned, slowly, carefully, over many months. A substance called Velshire was being mixed into her evening tea by someone in the royal kitchen. Velshire does not kill, it weakens, it slows the nerves, dulls the senses, makes a warrior who should be unbeatable into a warrior who is only mostly unbeatable. Just enough weakness to lose on the day when losing mattered most. I had learned who was paying for the poison. 3 nobles, all members of something called the Obsidian Syndicate, a shadow group that hated the queen's reforms. She had been opening trade routes to outside species. She had been talking about ending the slave markets in the outer provinces. She had been saying that the old ideas of pure bloodlines and superior species were wrong. The syndicate wanted her dead. They had found Dravik, a warlord from the southern deserts who was known for his cruelty, and they had promised him the throne. And if Dravik won today, the very first thing he planned to do, according to a conversation I had overheard 2 weeks ago, was to purge every off-world species from Thessari soil, starting with the humans. There were 17 of us hiding in the Undercity, 17 survivors from 3 different ships that had crashed in this system, women, men, 2 children. We had been sheltered by a kind old Thessari woman named Myra, who remembered when her own people had been strangers in the galaxy. If Dravik won, Myra would be Killed, and so would every one of us. I watched the queen try to rise. Her legs shook. The crowd was screaming her name and also screaming for her end. The same voices that had cheered her for decades were now thirsty for her defeat. Dravik raised the hammer over his head. The twin suns glinted on its polished surface. The queen looked up at him, and in her golden eyes I saw something I had not expected, not fear, not anger. Acceptance. She knew she was about to be killed. She had accepted it. Something in my chest went cold and then hot. I thought about my old training. Sergeant back on Earth, a grizzled woman named Roberts, who had shouted at me for 6 weeks in basic training. She had a saying she repeated so often we used to joke about it. Sometimes the only thing standing between decent order and true cruelty is one fool willing to do something completely stupid. I had always thought it was just a saying, a motivational phrase, something to put on a poster. Apparently, it was a prophecy. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. My hands were shaking. In my pocket, wrapped in old cloth, I carried a single piece of paper. I had been working on it for weeks. It was a list of names. It was a list of dates. It was everything I had learned about the poisoning plot, written in the old Thessari script that only scholars and priests could read. These days, I had been planning to give this paper to a contact in the Undercity who might have been able to get it to the Queen's loyal guards, but my contact had disappeared 3 days ago, probably dead. And I had been carrying this paper around ever since, not knowing what to do with it. Now I knew. There was an ancient Thessari law. I had read about it in a dusty text in the Undercity library where I had been teaching myself their language by candlelight. The law was called Kelvarath, the right of witness. Champion. It was so old that most nobles had forgotten it existed. It said that any sapient being of any rank or species could interrupt a trial of combat if they could prove that treachery had corrupted the fight. The penalty for invoking Kelvarath falsely was immediate death. The penalty for invoking it correctly was that you had to finish the fight yourself. The hammer was coming down. The Queen closed her eyes. I will never know exactly what made me do it. Maybe it was the 17 humans in the Undercity. Maybe it was Myra who had fed me soup when I was starving. Maybe it was my sister Rebecca back on Earth, who I had not seen in almost 3 years and might never see again. Maybe it was just Sergeant Roberts shouting in my memory. Or maybe it was the simple fact that I was tired of hiding, tired of being afraid, tired of watching bad things happen and doing nothing. I pushed through the crowd. I shoved a large alien out of my way. I jumped up onto the stone barrier at the edge of the arena, and I shouted the word at the top of my lungs. Kelvarath. The word echoed off the crystalline walls of the Grand Colosseum. It bounced through the arches. It carried across the sand. Dravik froze. His hammer stopped in mid-swing. The crowd went silent. 200,000 aliens, and not a single one of them made a sound. I shouted it again, louder, my voice cracking. Kelvarath. I invoked Kelvarath. Every face in the arena turned toward me. I could feel the weight of their attention, like a physical force pressing against my skin. The Queen opened her eyes. Her golden gaze found me across the sand, and I saw her confusion, her disbelief. And then I did something I had not planned on doing. something that would change my life forever, something that would either save me or end me in the next 60 seconds. I reached up with both hands and I pulled back my hood. The gasp that rose from the crowd was the loudest sound I had ever heard. A human in the sacred Colosseum. A lesser species in the holy arena of the Thessari. It was unthinkable. It was an insult. In some provinces, just being a human in this building was punishable by a long and unpleasant death. But I was here, and I was standing, and I had invoked the ancient right. I pulled the paper from my pocket. I held it up. My hands were no longer shaking. I felt strangely calm, the way you feel in a dream when you already know how it ends. I am Daniel Hayes of Earth, I called out. In the best Thessari I could manage, I invoke Kelvarath. The queen has been poisoned. I have proof. I name the traitors who did this, and I demand the right to stand as her witness champion. The Colosseum erupted. Some nobles in the royal box leapt too, their feet pointing at me, screaming for guards. Others sat frozen there, faces pale because they knew exactly who I was about to name. The commoners around me pulled away as if I were on fire. Someone threw a piece of fruit at my head. It missed. Through all of it, the queen watched me. She was still on her knees. She was still bleeding. Dravik was still standing over her with his hammer raised, but her eyes were locked on mine, and in them I saw something shift. The acceptance was gone. In its place was something sharper, something like hope, and something like a question. The question was simple. Under Thessari law, the challenged monarch had to accept or reject the witness champion. If she accepted me and I lost the fight, she would still die, and so would I. If she rejected me, I would be executed immediately for invoking the sacred right falsely. She had nothing to lose either way. Her voice, when it came, was a rasp, but it carried across the silent arena like a bell ringing in a quiet valley. I accept, she said. I accept the human's champion claim. Dravik Kaur turned his head slowly. He looked at me across the sand, his heavy face split into a grin showing teeth like black knives. And I realized with a strange and distant clarity that I was about to fight a warlord twice my size in single combat in front of 200,000 witnesses for the life of an alien queen I had never met. I climbed down onto the sand. The guards came for me first, 4 of them in polished silver armor, hands on the hilts of their curved swords. They surrounded me at the edge of the arena, and for a moment I thought they were going to drag me away and cut my throat in some quiet back room. Invocation or no invocation. But their captain, a tall female Thessari with a long scar across her snout, simply stared at me for a long moment. Then she nodded once. You will come with me, she said in galactic trade. Her voice was flat. Rights must be observed. They marched me across the sand. The crowd was still in chaos, a rolling sea of noise. I kept my eyes forward. I kept my chin up. I was very aware that if I tripped, if I looked weak, if I did anything that suggested a human might not be worthy of this moment, the whole thing might fall apart before it even began. We passed close to the queen. She was being lifted onto a stretcher by her own guards. Her medic, a shorter Thessari with pale green scales, was already working on her wounds. As I walked past, she turned her head and looked at me. Why, she whispered, why would you do this? I did not have a good answer. I did not have a noble speech prepared. I did not have any wisdom to offer. So I just told her the truth. Because someone has to, I said, and nobody else was standing up. Her golden eyes closed. I could not tell if she was smiling or frowning. Thessari. Faces are hard to read. The guards marched me into the shadow of the Colosseum walls, into a stone antechamber that smelled of old blood and older dust. And the captain with the scar told me I had exactly 1 hour to prepare for a fight I was almost certainly going to lose. 1 hour to prepare to face a warlord. 1 hour to figure out how a skinny, half-starved, scared translator from Earth was going to do what a 7ft queen with 4 arms could not. 1 hour. I sat down on the cold stone bench. My legs finally gave out and I began to think very, very hard. The armorer arrived first. He was an older Thessari, his silver scales dulled to gray with age, and he said nothing as he measured me with a length of braided string. He made small clicking sounds with his tongue, which I had learned was the Thessari equivalent of tutting in frustration. You are small, he said finally, in rough galactic trade and the wrong shape. The armor will not fit well. Do your best, I told him. He brought in a set of plate armor that must have belonged to a young Thessari. Noble, long dead, judging by the dust on it. He strapped it onto me piece by piece. The shoulder pieces hung loose. The chest plate was too wide. The leg guards rubbed against my knees because my legs bent the wrong way for them. But it was armor. It was better than nothing. Next came the weapons master. He laid out a row of blades on a stone table. Hammers, axes, curved swords, long spears, short swords, a strange weapon that looked like 3 knives welded together on a chain. I studied them all. I had trained with blades during my peacekeeper years, but only briefly. Mostly we had used stun batons and non-lethal restraint tools. Still, I remembered the basics. I remembered what my instructor had said about weapon weight and reach. I picked up the short sword. It was light enough for me to swing quickly. The reach was terrible compared to Dravik's hammer, but the reach on any weapon I could lift would be terrible. Compared to his hammer, speed was my only advantage. This one, I said. The weapons master clicked his tongue. It sounded disapproving, but he strapped the sheath to my hip without comment. Finally, a young servant girl came, carrying a clay cup of water. She was smaller than most Thessari, barely taller than me, her scales a soft blue color that reminded me of the sky back home on a clear morning. She could not have been more than 16 years old in human terms. She set the cup down on the bench beside me. Her hands were shaking. I am not supposed to be here, she whispered in Thessari, but I wanted to bring you water and to tell you something. I looked at her. What is your name? Esselin, she said. My name is Esselin. Thank you for the water, Esselin. She took a deep breath. Her eyes were wet. My brother was named Tekran. He was a scholar. He found out about the poison plot 2 months ago. He was going to tell the Queen's Guard. She swallowed hard. Dravik's men killed him. They left his body in an alley behind our mother's shop. My mother has not spoken a word since that day. I did not know what to say. I reached out and put my hand gently on her shoulder. She did not pull away. Esselin, I said, I am so sorry. I want you to win, she said. Her voice was fierce now, the tears still falling. But her jaw set. I need you to win, so came to tell you something about Dravik. Something my brother wrote in his research notes before they killed him. I leaned closer. Dravik was wounded in the southern campaigns 2 years ago, she said. A spear went through his side between his third and fourth ribs. The wound never healed fully. There is scar tissue there, weaker than the rest of his armor can cover. If you can strike him there deep and hard, it will reach his secondary heart. I stared at her. She was giving me the most valuable piece of information I could possibly have. Why are you telling me this? I asked. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. Because my brother cannot, she said. So I must. She bowed once, low and formal, then she turned and slipped out of the chamber. Like a shadow, I sat alone for a long moment staring at the water cup. Then I picked up the sword. I stood up. I walked in a small circle, testing the weight, feeling the armor settle on my shoulders. My ribs still ached from an old injury I had taken in the Undercity. My thigh muscles were tight with fear. But my mind was clear now. I had a plan forming. It was not a good plan. It was probably not even a smart plan, but it was a plan. Between his third and fourth ribs, I would not be able to overpower him. I would not be able to outlast him in a pure contest of strength, but I was smaller, I was faster, I was more desperate than he could imagine. And now, thanks to a grieving sister with blue scales, I knew exactly where to aim. The horn sounded outside, 3 long, mournful notes, the signal. The captain with the scar opened the door to the antechamber. She looked at me in my ill-fitting armor with my 2 small sword, and I saw something flicker across her face. It might have been pity, it might have been respect, it might have been both. It is time, human, she said. I took a deep breath. I thought about Rebecca back on Earth. I thought about Myra in the Undercity and the 17 humans hiding in her basement. I thought about Esselin and her brother Tekrin. And then I walked out onto the sand to face Dravik Core. The roar of the crowd hit me like a physical wave. 200,000 voices, some cheering, some jeering, all of them impossibly loud. The twin suns were high overhead now, baking the arena. The sand was still stained with the Queen's blue blood. Dravik stood in the center of the Colosseum. He had removed his helmet. His face was broad and cruel, with heavy ridges above his eyes and a jaw full of black teeth. He was not wearing all of his heavy armor anymore. He had stripped down to a lighter set, thinking, I suppose, that he did not need full protection against a creature like me. That was his first mistake. He watched me approach. He spun his hammer in one of his 4 hands, casual and lazy, as if this were a sport. As I got within 10 paces of him, he spoke to me in broken galactic trade. Little human, he said, I'm going to take my time with you. I will make it last. I will wear your skin as a cloak when I sit on the throne tonight. I stopped. I looked up at him. I thought about the 17 humans in the Undercity. I thought about my sister. I thought about Sergeant Roberts. And I smiled. Big talk, I said. I have heard worse. From an ex-girlfriend. Somewhere in the crowd, someone laughed. A single voice. High and sharp, a Thessari laugh. Then another joined in, then another. Dravik's smile dropped. His eyes narrowed. The referee, an ancient priest in white robes, raised a bronze staff between us. He spoke the opening words of the ritual. I did not hear them. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I was watching Dravik's shoulders, watching for the first twitch of movement, because I knew the priest was about to step away. The priest stepped away. The horn sounded. Dravik moved. He was faster than I expected, far faster. The hammer came around in a horizontal swing that would have turned my head into a memory if I had been standing where I had been standing half a second earlier. But I was not standing there anymore. I was already diving sideways, rolling across the hot sand, coming up with my sword ready. The crowd screamed. Dravik turned, not even winded, and came at me again. I ducked under a second swing. I felt the wind of the hammer pass over my helmet. I could not afford to let any of these hits land. Even a glancing blow from that weapon would break bones. Direct hit would be the end of the fight. I had to stay moving. I had to stay small. I had to make him chase me and get him tired. Humans are endurance predators. It is one of the oldest tricks in our evolutionary book. On the African savanna, our distant ancestors used to chase antelope for hours, sometimes for days, until the antelope simply collapsed from exhaustion. We were not the fastest, we were not the strongest, but we could keep going when nothing else could. Dravik was a sprinter, not a marathon runner. His species was built for short, brutal fights. His muscles were dense and powerful, but they would burn out. I just had to survive long enough for that to happen. I stayed on the edges of the arena. I used the fallen ceremonial statues as cover. When he swung, I moved. When he paused, I circled. I made him come to me. I made him turn. I made him lift that heavy hammer again and again. The minutes dragged on. The crowd slowly stopped screaming. They went quiet. They were watching something they had never seen before. A small creature refusing to die, making a giant work for every swing. Dravik began to breathe harder. His swings grew slower. His aim grew less precise. And then, almost 20 minutes into the fight, he made a mistake. He swung his hammer in a great overhead arc, putting all his remaining strength into it, aiming to crush me into the stone of a falling column. I saw it coming. I dropped to my knees and slid beneath the blow on the slick sand. Hammer hit the column instead of me. Stone shattered, dust filled the air. And in that moment of dust, I was behind him. I thought of Esalen. I thought of Tekrin. I thought of a map drawn in a dead scholar's handwriting between the third and fourth ribs. I drove the short sword forward with every ounce of strength I had left. The blade found the scar tissue. It slipped past the armor. It went deep. Dravik core made a sound I will never forget. It was not rage. It was not fear. It was simple, total surprise. The surprise of a creature who had never truly believed, until that final second, that he could actually lose. He fell to his knees. The great hammer slipped from his hand and thudded into the sand. I stepped back. My legs were shaking. My sword was still in my grip. I looked up at the stands, at the royal box, at the ocean of alien faces staring down at me. For a long moment, nobody moved. And then the Colosseum exploded. Not into violence, not into outrage, into cheering. I dropped my sword. My knees buckled. I sat down hard on the sand beside the fallen warlord, breathing in great, ragged gasps. The queen was being carried into the arena. Her medics were walking beside her stretcher. She raised one of her 4 hands and pointed at me. and her voice, weak but steady, carried across the suddenly silent crowd. "Kelthara Vass," she said. I did not know what it meant, not then. But later, Esselin would tell me. Much later, when everything had changed. When the politics of a galaxy were beginning to shift because of what happened that afternoon in the Grand Colosseum of Velkara. It meant my champion. It also meant something else, something older, something that had not been said by a Thessari monarch to a being of another species in over 1,000 years. It meant my friend. I woke in a bed softer than anything I had touched in years. The ceiling above me was made of pale crystal carved with constellations I did not recognize. Silk sheets covered me. Healing gel, cool and smelling faintly of mint, was wrapped around my ribs and my right thigh. My left arm was in a sling. My head was pounding, but the pain was distant, muffled, as though it belonged to someone else. A Thessari medic noticed I was awake. She was older, her scales a pale green, and she moved quickly to my bedside with a clay cup of water. She helped me drink. The water was cold and sweet. I had never tasted anything so good. "How long?" I rasped. My voice sounded like someone else's. "9 days," she said. "You have been asleep for 9 days, human." I tried to sit up. She gently pushed me back down. "You must rest," she said. "You were badly hurt. You nearly lost your arm. You lost a great deal of blood, but you will live." I closed my eyes. 9 days, a lot can happen in 9 days. "The Queen?" I asked. The medic smiled. Thessari smiles are strange things because their mouths are not built quite like ours, but I had learned to read them. "The Queen lives," she said. "She is weak still, but the antidote to Velshire was synthesized in time. She will recover fully. She asks about you every morning." I let out a long breath. Something in my chest unclenched that had been tight for weeks. "The 3 nobles." The medic's smile faded. "They have answered for their crimes, that is all you need to know." I nodded. I did not press her. "And the 17 humans?" Her green eyes softened. "All safe," she said. "All brought to the palace, all given clean rooms and food and medical care." The Queen gave the order on the 3rd day after the trial. As soon as she could speak, "They are asking about you too. A woman named Myra is waiting to see you whenever you are ready." I turned my face toward the wall. I did not want the medic to see me cry. Thessari are not a people who weep easily, and I did not want to appear weak in her eyes. She understood. She touched my good shoulder gently and left the room. I lay there for a long time, staring at the carved ceiling, thinking about how close I had come to dying, and how many people had come closer still, and how it had all somehow worked out. Over the next 3 days, I began to heal. I was moved to a larger chamber with a balcony overlooking the city of Velkara. The capital stretched out below me, a sea of crystal towers and green gardens and winding stone streets. Twin suns rose and set in a sky full of purple clouds. Airships drifted between the spires, small and slow, like fish in a vast blue ocean. Visitors came. Myra came first, the old Thessari woman who had sheltered us in the Undercity. She sat beside my bed and held my hand in hers and cried silent tears of joy. She told me the other humans were being treated with respect. A young boy named Oliver, who had been the youngest of the survivors, had asked when he could meet the hero human who saved them all. I told Myra I was no hero, I was just a scared translator who got lucky. She smiled and shook her head. That is what all real heroes say. Daniel, she said, the ones who call themselves heroes are the ones you cannot trust. Then Esselin came, the blue-scaled girl, who had told me about Dravik's old wound. She had been promoted, I learned. She was now part of the palace staff, assigned to the Queen's personal service. She bowed to me formally when she entered the room, and I waved her off. Sit, I said, please sit, you do not need to bow to me. She sat. She looked smaller in the palace robes than she had in the servant's dress I first met her in, but her eyes were brighter, something in her had lifted. My mother spoke yesterday, she told me, for the first time since my brother died. She said his name, she said Tekren's name. I reached out and took her hand. She squeezed back tight. I think she will speak more now. Esselin said, I think she will be able to begin living again because Tekren's knowledge, his research, his work, it mattered. It saved the Queen. It saved the Dominion. You made his life matter. Daniel, you made his life matter, I told her. You carried his words to me. All I did was listen. She smiled at that, and she stayed for an hour telling me about the news from the city, about the riots and the celebrations, and the strange new songs being sung in the markets, about a small creature from Earth who had walked onto the sand and done the impossible. On the fourth day, I could walk again. Slowly and with a cane, but I could walk, and on the fifth day I was summoned to the throne room. The palace servants dressed me in formal Thessari robes, deep blue with silver trim, cut to fit my strange human shape. As well as they could manage, they braided my hair back from my face. They gave me a polished walking staff to replace the cane because they said it would look more dignified. I was led through corridors of pale stone and crystal, past gardens of strange flowers and pools filled with silver fish, past statues of Thessari, monarchs going back 1,000 generations. My escort was silent. I was silent. My heart was pounding. I had never been inside a royal palace before. The throne room was enormous. The ceiling rose so high that clouds could have formed inside it. Sunlight poured through great windows of colored crystal, painting the floor and shifting patterns of blue and gold and green. And at the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from a single massive piece of black stone, sat Queen Ithara Vas Kellen. She was dressed in white, simple robes. No heavy ceremony. Her 4 hands rested on the arms of the throne. She looked tired but alive. Her silver scales caught the light, and her golden eyes followed me as I walked the long distance toward her. The guards at the base of the throne stepped aside. I did not know if I was supposed to kneel, so I bowed. Instead, low and formal, and held the bow for a long count. Rise, Daniel Hayes of Earth, the Queen said. I rose. She studied me for a long moment. Then she did something I had not expected. She stood up from the throne. Her medics had told me this was still painful for her. She descended the 3 steps, and she stopped in front of me, looking down from her great silver height, and she placed one of her 4 hands lightly on my shoulder. I owe you my life, she said. Her voice was soft, meant only for me. My entire world owes you their future. I cannot repay such a debt. Your Majesty, I do not ask. I know you do not ask, she said. That is part of why the debt is so great. She stepped back. She returned to her throne. Her guard stood straighter. Her advisors, a small group of Thessari nobles in gray robes, watched from the shadows at the edges of the hall. I have a problem, Daniel Hayes, she said, and I wish to discuss it with you because it concerns you directly. I waited. Thessari law demands that I reward my witness champion, she continued. Rewards are traditional, land, titles, gold, a seat on my council, but there is no precedent for a human witness champion. Every option I consider will cause a political earthquake somewhere in my dominion and beyond my dominion. In the wider galaxy, there are 18 star nations watching what I do next. She tilted her head, her 4 hands shifted on the throne. Some of them are horrified that I accepted a human champion. Some of them are intrigued. A few of them are frightened because if a human can stand on the sand of the Grand Colosseum and defeat a warlord, what other old assumptions about your species might also be wrong? I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. The galaxy has believed for a long time that humanity is a lesser species, the Queen said, young, soft, primitive, curiosity at best, not to be taken seriously. She looked at me with her golden eyes. You proved them all wrong in a single afternoon. I swallowed. My mouth was dry. Your Majesty, I said, I did not set out to prove anything about my species. I set out to save you and to save the humans hiding in your undercity. That is all. I know, she said, that is also part of why the debt is so great. You did not perform, you simply acted. That is the mark of true nobility. We have few nobles left in this galaxy who understand that. She leaned forward slightly. Tell me what you want, Daniel Hayes. I will grant any request that is within my power. Speak plainly. I took a deep breath. I had thought about this moment during my long days of healing. I had known she would ask. I had rehearsed 100 answers. All of them had fallen apart in the moment because none of them felt right. So I just spoke the truth. I want safe passage home for the 17 humans in the Undercity, I said. Passage to Earth or to any human colony they choose, paid for by your treasury. I want them given travel documents that cannot be questioned at any port in the galaxy. I want their stories protected. They have been through enough. Done, the Queen said immediately. It is already done. I signed the order 3 days ago. I blinked. Oh. What else? I want the Obsidian Syndicate investigated fully, not just the 3 nobles I named. I know there are more. I know they have connections in other star systems. I want you to pull up every root of this weed so it cannot grow back. Also already in progress, the Queen said. My intelligence service has been working day and night. We are already tracing syndicate operatives in 4 other systems. But go on, what do you want for yourself? That was the hard question. I thought about it for a long moment. Your Majesty, I said slowly, I came to this world by accident. My ship crashed. I have spent 11 months trying to survive. I am tired. I miss my sister. I miss my home. I have not eaten real Earth food in almost 3 years. I paused. What I want for myself is to go home. The Queen was silent. Her advisors murmured among themselves in the shadows. She raised one of her 4 hands and they fell silent. I understand, she said. That is a fair request. She paused. May I ask one thing of you before you go? Anything within my power, I said. Stay for 30 days, she said. Just 30 days. Help me with one matter, and then a ship will take you home with full honors, with the gratitude of my people, and with enough gold and currency to make your life comfortable for as long as you live. I considered this. What matter? I asked. The Queen's golden eyes grew very serious. The galaxy has noticed humanity now, she said. Every embassy in every capital is talking about you. Some snorts of them are talking about you with suspicion, others with interest. Few, I fear, with plans. She leaned back on her throne. I want you to be my royal witness, champion in a ceremonial sense for 30 days. I want you to stand beside me when I receive ambassadors from other star nations. I want the galaxy to see you, to see that humanity has allies now, to understand that your species is under my protection and under the protection of any nation that values its friendship with mine. She looked at me with something that might have been hope. After 30 days you go home. I will not stop you, but those 30 days will change the way this galaxy sees your entire species, perhaps for generations. I sat down on a bench that a servant quickly brought. My legs were tired and the conversation had grown larger than I was ready for. 30 days. 30 days to change how a galaxy saw my whole species. I thought about Rebecca on Earth. I thought about my parents who did not even know I was alive. I thought about all the children who would grow up in a galaxy that either respected humans or did not, based on what happened in the next 30 days. Your Majesty, I said at last, I will stay 30 days and then I go home. Agreed, the Queen said. She rose again from throne. She descended the steps, and she did something that sent a quiet shockwave through every advisor in the hall. She bowed to me, a Thessari queen to a human. It was a short bow, a simple bow, but it was real. When she rose, she smiled. Then let us begin, my champion, she said. The next morning I stood on the high balcony of the palace watching the sunrise paint the spires of Velcara in gold and pink light. The city below was waking up. Airships were lifting off from distant platforms. The markets were beginning to open. Somewhere down there, 17 humans were packing small bags and getting ready for the journey home. Asilin came out onto the balcony. She carried 2 cups of steaming tea, one in each of 2 of her hands. Her other 2 hands held a folded piece of paper. Tea, she said, handing me a cup. My mother made it. She asked me to bring it to you personally. She says thank you. Daniel Hayes, she says she will say it herself someday when she is ready. Tell her I understand, I said. We stood in silence for a while sipping the tea. It was good, warm and spiced, and unfamiliar and somehow exactly right for this moment. There is a letter, Asilin said. Finally, she handed me the folded paper from the Queen. She asked me to give it to you this morning. She said you should read it alone when you have time. I took it. I tucked it into my robe. I would read it later. Asilin, I said, may I ask you something? Anything? Do you think I am doing the right thing, staying for 30 days, delaying my trip home? She thought about it carefully. She was young, but she was not a fool. I think, she said at last, that when You stood up in the Colosseum. You were thinking about the 17 humans in the Undercity, but what happened next was bigger than them, bigger than you, bigger than any of us. The Queen is. Right, the whole galaxy is watching now. And the next 30 days will shape how they see your people for a long, long time. She paused. I think you should do what you did in the arena. You should think about the people who will be hurt if you do nothing, and then you should stand up. I smiled. The sun warmed my face. Tea warmed my hands. That is a very wise thing to say. Asilin. My brother used to say it, she replied. He said the universe bends toward those who stand up when everyone else is sitting down. I stood on that balcony for a long time. After she left, I watched the twin suns rise fully into the sky. I watched the city come alive. Somewhere out there my life was waiting for me, my sister, my home, my world. But first 30 days. 30 days to stand beside a silver-scaled queen and show the galaxy what humans could be. 30 days that would, though I did not know it yet, change everything. Not just for me. For every human everywhere. And for every species that had ever looked at us and thought we were small. The first ambassador arrived on the third day of my stay. I had spent the previous 2 days being taught the Queen's chief protocol officer was a stern older Thessari named Ves Aramai, and she drilled me on every detail of Thessari court etiquette until my head was spinning. How to stand, how to bow, how to greet each of the 9 main species we might encounter, which hand gestures were respectful and which would start a war. How to eat properly at a state dinner, which turned out to be harder than it sounded because each species had different customs and you were expected to be able to perform all of them. I was not a good student. I kept mixing up the bows. I once greeted a visiting priest with a gesture that actually meant I am hungry, feed me immediately, and he stared at me for a full 30 seconds before bursting into a laugh so loud the windows rattled. But Ves Aramai was patient in her own strict way, and by the 3rd day I was ready, or ready enough, or at least not likely to cause a diplomatic disaster in the first 10 minutes. The first ambassador was from the Krevthan Confederacy. The Krevthan were an aggressive empire. On the far edge of our sector, they were large insected beings, roughly man-shaped, but with hard exoskeletons and multiple sets of compound eyes. They had been threatening human colonies in their border region for almost 5 years. Their ambassador, a tall warrior named Kreshtenner, arrived with a full entourage of 12 bodyguards and a public announcement that he wanted to meet the human who had made such interesting noise. I was not sure if that was a threat. I suspected it was. I stood beside the Queen's throne in my formal blue robes, and I kept my face very still as Kreshtenner approached. He stopped at the proper distance. He bowed to the Queen. He turned his compound eyes on me. So, he said in galactic trade, his voice was dry and chittering like dry leaves blown across stone. This is the human who stood up. I am Daniel Hayes, I said. I kept my voice level. I am honored to meet you. Ambassador. Are you? It was not a question. He walked in a slow circle around me. His bodyguards watched. The Queen watched. I did not move. My people have been considering a military action against your Earth colonies for some months now, Kreshtenner said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather. Our war council met last week. Do you know what we discussed? I do not, Ambassador. We discussed you, he said. We watched the recordings of your duel. We watched you walk onto the sand. We watched you survive against a warlord twice your size. We discussed what sort of species produces such individuals. He stopped circling. He stood very close to me, close enough that I could smell the strange oil on his exoskeleton, like cinnamon and metal mixed together. And we came to a decision. Daniel Hayes, would you like to know what it was? I would, Ambassador. His compound eyes flickered. It was the Krevthin equivalent of a smile. We decided to postpone our military action indefinitely. We decided to open trade talks with your Earth government. Instead, because if your species can produce one Daniel Hayes, perhaps it can produce 1,000, and we would rather trade with 1,000 Daniel Hayeses than fight them. He stepped back. He bowed to me. A Krevthin warrior bowing to a human. Perhaps we have been underestimating your people, he said. I could hear the Queen breathing slowly beside me, steady and controlled. I could hear the distant hum of the palace. I could hear my own heart pounding. I did not know what to say. Everything they had taught me in protocol class seemed to have fallen out of my head. So I simply bowed back, deeply, respectfully. We have been underestimated for a long time, Ambassador. I said. We are hoping that is changing. Kreshtenner chittered. It was, I realized. After a moment, a laugh, a real one. Perhaps it is, he said. Perhaps it is. And so the 30 days began. Ambassador after ambassador, delegation after delegation, each one came to see the human, to take his measure, to decide how their nation would treat my species going forward. Some came hostile, some came curious. Some came with questions I could not answer and problems I could not solve. But I stood beside Queen Athara for each of them, and I bowed the right bows, and I spoke the right words, and I was simply present, a human visible, a human respected, a human standing at the right hand of one of the most powerful monarchs in the sector. A message was being sent. On the 10th day, a delegation from Earth finally arrived. They had been summoned by my own government as soon as word of what happened had reached them. The ambassador was a kind-faced older woman named Harriet Blackwood, who had been in the diplomatic service for 40 years. She embraced me like a grandmother. When she saw me, she cried openly. She told me my sister Rebecca was well and that my parents had been informed I was alive. They are so proud of you, Daniel, she whispered. The whole planet is. I had not been ready for that. That night I sat on the balcony and looked up at the stars, somewhere out there in a direction I could not quite place was Earth, my home, my people, my sister. 30 days had seemed long a week ago. Now it seemed impossibly short. On the 20th day, the Queen asked me to accompany her on a state visit to a neighboring system. On the 25th day, we hosted the Galactic Concord's first ever delegation to the Thessari Dominion, and I spoke in my halting diplomatic Thessari about humanity's willingness to be a partner in a better galaxy. On the 29th day, Ambassador Blackwood pulled me aside in a quiet corridor of the palace. She told me that the Earth government had a request. They wanted me to stay. They wanted me to become Earth's first permanent ambassador to the Thessari Dominion. They wanted me to be the bridge between our species. They said no one else could Do what I had already done. I told her I would think about it. That night I pulled out the letter the Queen had given me on my first morning. I had never opened it. I had been saving it. I broke the seal. Her handwriting was small and precise. Daniel Hayes asterisk. If you are reading this, you have chosen to stay 30 days. Thank you. By the time you finish reading this, you will likely have already begun to understand why those days mattered. I want you to know that whatever you decide at the end of those 30 days, you will have my gratitude forever. Stay, and you will have a home in my palace. For as long as you live, go, and you will leave with my blessing and my friendship. But I want to tell you something, because I think you should hear it from me rather than from the politicians who will surround you in the coming weeks. The galaxy is changing. It has been changing for a long time, slowly, like a great river shifting its course grain of sand by grain of sand. What you did in the arena did not start this change, it simply revealed it. We had all been waiting, I think, for the moment when the old lies would finally break. A lesser species is not lesser, a greater species is not greater. We are all simply beings trying to find our way through a universe that is far too large for any of us to understand alone. You stood up, Daniel Hayes, when everyone else was sitting down. Thank you for that. Whatever you decide, know that I consider you my friend, Kelthara. Always. Ithara. I read the letter twice, then I folded it carefully and put it back in my robe. I stood on the balcony. I looked at the stars. I thought about Rebecca. I thought about my parents. I thought about the life I had thought I was going back to. And I thought about everything Ambassador Blackwood had said about being a bridge, about being the person who could do what no one else could. On the 30th morning, I went to the throne room. The Queen was there, waiting. Her advisors were waiting. Ambassador Blackwood was waiting. Esselyn stood at the edge of the hall, her blue scales catching the morning light, her 4 hands clasped in front of her. I bowed to the Queen. She nodded. I have made my decision, I said. The hall went silent. I am going home, I said. A small sound escaped Esselyn. It might have been a sob. I did not look at her. If I looked at her, I would not be able to finish. But I'm not staying home, I continued. I will go to Earth. I will see my family. I will eat real food and sleep in my old bed and walk on grass that grew in the soil where I was born. And then in 3 months I will return as Earth's ambassador to the Thessari Dominion, as your friend, as perhaps someone who can help build this bridge that ambassadors and monarchs have been talking about for weeks. The Queen stood from her throne. She descended the steps. She took both of my hands in 2 of her 4, and her golden eyes were bright. A wise decision, Daniel Hayes, she said. I hope so, I said. Esselyn ran across the hall. She threw her arms around me. She was taller than me, but she somehow made herself smaller. In that embrace, pressing her face against my shoulder, I held her back. I did not try to hide my tears this time. You come back, she whispered fiercely. You promise me you come back. I promise, I said. 3 months I will come back. I will bring you something from Earth, a gift. What kind of gift? I thought about it. A book, I said. A human book about a person who stood up. She laughed through her tears. The ship that took me home was a Thessari diplomatic cruiser. It was Beautiful, silver-hulled, sleek, fast. The captain bowed to me every time she saw me, which was at least twice a day, until I finally convinced her to just nod, which seemed to physically pain her, but which she eventually managed. The journey took 11 days. I spent most of it writing. I wrote letters, I wrote plans, I wrote a long document for the Earth government about everything I had learned in my nearly 13 months away. I wrote a short story for Esalen in Simple Thessari about a boy named Daniel who grew up on a small blue planet and one day ended up on a balcony in a crystal palace and who had never once regretted leaving home. I wrote to my sister Rebecca, though I would see her soon. I wrote to my parents. I wrote to Sergeant Roberts, who had retired years ago and who probably did not remember me, but who would, I thought, like to know that her saying had finally turned out to be true. And on the morning of the 11th day, the ship came out of its long jump, and I stood at a crystal window, and I saw Earth for the first time in almost 3 years. It was smaller than I remembered, bluer, more fragile. I could not stop crying. The captain came and stood beside me. She did not speak for a long while. Finally she said, in careful galactic trade, "Your home is very beautiful, Daniel." Hayes. Yes, I said, it is. The shuttle down to the surface was full of officials and cameras and dignitaries. I greeted them all. I bowed the right bows. I spoke the right words. Ambassador Blackwood was there. My parents were there, and at the very back of the crowd, trying to push her way forward, was my sister Rebecca. I walked past everyone else. I walked straight to her, and she ran to me, and we met in the middle of the landing pad, and I held my sister for the first time in almost 3 years, and I did not let her go for a long time. "You are so thin," she whispered. "I know. You have scars. I know. Mom made lasagna. She said it is your favorite. She has been making it every Sunday since they told us you were alive, just in case you came home on a Sunday." I laughed for a long time. "Then let us go eat lasagna, Rebecca," I said. "Let us go eat lasagna. I spent 3 months on Earth. I ate my mother's lasagna. I walked in the rain. I slept in my childhood bed. I sat with my father in the garden and watched him tend his tomatoes. I told my family, slowly and over many quiet evenings, the story of everything that had happened. I gave interviews. I spoke to the government. I walked through crowds of ordinary people who wanted to touch my hand or take my photo or just say thank you for making them feel, for the first time in a long time, that humans might be more than what the galaxy thought we were. And then, as I had promised, I went back. I went back to Velkara, to the Queen, to Esalen, to a life I had not chosen, but which had somehow chosen me. I brought Esalen her book. It was called To Kill a Mockingbird, ***. It took me a long time to translate the title into Thessari because some ideas do not translate well. In the end, I called it The Song of the Small Bird Who Stood Up. She cried when I gave it to her. I think she understood. I took up my role as Earth's ambassador. I began the slow, patient work of building the bridge the Queen had spoken of. It was not glamorous work. Most of it was paperwork and long meetings and careful speeches. But every morning I would stand on the balcony and watch the twin suns rise over the crystal city. And I would remember the moment when I pulled back My hood and a coliseum of aliens gasped, and a silver-scaled queen on her knees looked across the sand at me with hope in her dying eyes. I remembered what my old sergeant used to say, and I thought about how she was not quite right, because sometimes the thing standing between decent order and true cruelty is not one fool willing to do something stupid. Sometimes it is one human willing to stand up when everyone else is sitting down, and sometimes that is enough to change the course of a galaxy. The sun rises, the city wakes, I sip my tea, and somewhere in the vast and strange and beautiful darkness between the stars, 1,000 other humans on 1,000 other worlds are being seen, truly seen for the first time, because one of us stood up, and now none of us will ever sit down again.